Good morning, everyone. It's Colleen, the Preparedness Pro. I have a great guest for you today. This is going to be life-changing for some of you. I know that I've enjoyed what I've gotten to know about her and her life. I have Debbie Weiss, who is a best-selling author. She is the author of a memoir called On Second Thought, Maybe I Can. I just love that title. She's also the co-author in an Amazon bestseller. It's a collaborative book called Heart Whispers. Debbie's also an entrepreneur running both an insurance agency. She runs a State Farm insurance agency and her online store called A Sprinkle of Hearts. She also hosts the Maybe I Can podcast, which has led her to become an inspirational speaker. She was a longtime family caregiver, and of course, she's a mother as well. Some of you are going to be able to relate to some of her challenges. And I hope, more importantly, you'll be able to relate to how she overcame them and her view on life now. You'll see Debbie in all her pink array in the background. She's even got, we can't see it right now the way I've got the shot, but she's even got a pink rotary phone, which I just love in the background. Debbie, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited to have you. We have some similarities. I've struggled with weight quite a bit. I was down 100 pounds. I'm back on the up, thanks to struggling with infertility and the drugs that they put me on. That really whacked things out. So you can relate to that. Fortunately, I've never had to be a long-term caregiver. I think that would be very trying. I was a home health caregiver for a little while. It was one of the jobs that I had in my 20s, but that was in my 20s. I was a little bit more agile and able, and that was my job. It wasn't a family member that I got hooked up with and had to take care of. So why don't you share with us? You've tackled some of life's most intense curveballs with weight struggles, caregiving at 17. I mean, there's so many other things that a 17-year-old wants to do. Infertility, and then even becoming a widow. But here you are, shining like a disco ball on a Saturday night. What sparked your mindset shift? How did you get from feeling like a victim and just having to react to life to actually chasing your dreams?
Well, I think it happened when I was in my 50s because there was something about being in my 50s or turning 50 that made me step back and take a look at my life and say, I am on a trajectory to quickly be at the end of my life, because the first 50 years went quickly, even though it didn't feel like it when you're in the moment, right? And I thought, I don't want to be that person at the end of my life who looks back with regret of things that I haven't done or experienced. And I didn't have a list of things to do specifically. I didn't know what that meant, but I just knew, and I realized at that point that if I didn't change, then it wasn't going to change. I thought that the circumstances that were happening, the people, that was what was driving the direction of my life. But I realized that's not true. It's me. And so I've been on a journey since then over the last decade of, discovering more about myself and figuring out what I want and heading in that direction.
Did you not allow yourself to have dreams then because of the trajectory of your life? Is that why you didn't have a list of things to do?
That is an excellent question. I don't know. It's so funny. I almost feel like I didn't even have time to breathe, to think about what I wanted. I was always so worried about what everybody else wanted, needed. That was my identity, was being that girl, then woman who just does it all and takes care of everyone. And so I don't really think there was too much space to dream.
Mm. So giving ourselves space to dream, that's an important lesson that we can learn. In your memoir, On Second Thought, Maybe I Can, you reflect on some pivotal moments. Can you share one of those aha moments when you realized you were in the driver's seat of your life? And how might that inspire someone stuck in neutral today?
One of the things that while I was on this journey, I don't remember what I was even doing, Who remembers? You Google something 5,000 times a day, so I don't even know what the heck I was looking for. And a quote popped up from Glinda the Good Witch from The Wizard of Oz. And it said, "You have the power, my dear. You've just had to learn it for yourself. You've always had the power." And it made me realize, yeah, you know what? I do have the power. That quote doesn't just mean, Dorothy, click your heels 3 times and say, there's no place like home. All of us have always had the power to create the life that we want. I just really didn't even know it. I didn't realize that it was my responsibility. I just thought whatever happened, happened. I couldn't do anything to change it. And some things you can't change. You can't change what other people do. You can't change some events in your life, but you can always change how you react to those events.
So, what made you decide I'm going to have an insurance agency? I mean, you didn't just go small time, you went with State Farm. What made you decide to do that?
So I graduated from college with a degree in accounting. I then became a CPA, worked for a small accounting firm for 10 years, and knew that I wanted to change those tax seasons. I mean, with the small firms, it started in January. It went through the middle of April, 6, 7 days a week, nights. There was no life. And
That seems to be your theme.
yeah, I mean, it was really rough. There were things I loved about it. I mean, I did it for 10 years. There was other good parts of it, that I did enjoy, but I didn't know exactly what it was that I was looking to do. Did I want to go work for a bigger accounting firm? At that time, computers were just coming into play. Believe it or not, I was one of those people who wrote out trial balances with my paper and pencil and my adding machine, that I could have a contest with someone how fast I am. There was no computers, and we were just getting them, and software was just coming out. And so I wanted to launch a business to train bookkeepers how to use the accounting software. And that, so I was thinking I'm going to do that. I was just looking for what is it that interests me. And I have a very good friend who worked for the company, and she had this opportunity that was available. And I lived in Long Island, and this opportunity was in New Jersey, actually Western New Jersey, a part of New Jersey I was very unfamiliar with. And it was, my husband, when we made the decision, we were engaged, and he was a salesman. He sold plywood and building supplies, and he could just shoot the breeze with anyone about anything. And I thought, I don't, first of all, I'm going from accounting to sell insurance. Talk about boring. Like, what kind of shift is that? And my friend was such a great salesman. She said, look, Gary can do the selling and you'll like run the business because, I have business background. Okay. So we upended our lives, and it's a long story, but it was a very, very, very rough transition for the first 2 or 3 years. Very, very tough. Working together, not knowing what the heck we were doing, being in a place that was very different from where we grew up, having to meet, quotas and goals that, we just didn't know how to do it. And somehow and the money was also a huge problem. So we were under a tremendous amount of stress. We were living in my girlfriend's basement because we didn't have the money to live somewhere else. And we commuted together. It was like an hour away from where our office was. It was a lot. But in the end, I'll tell you, I don't know. Looking back, I don't know. I'd like to think I would, but if it weren't for my friend and my husband, I think I might have just turned around with my tail between my legs and gone back home to Long Island and gotten my job back, because I was miserable. I was miserable, but I couldn't let my friend down. She kind of stuck her neck out for me. And so I did it, and I'm very, very grateful that I did. It's now in May, I'll be celebrating my 30-year anniversary.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's wonderful. Preparedness folks are about resilience and adaptability. That whole lifestyle is full of those two characteristics. How did you develop the resilience to bounce back and to thrive despite your circumstances? And not just with the insurance, but with, infertility, becoming a widow, um, having your life dictated with the caregiving?
I it's a hard question to answer because when you're in the moment, and it's tough because I wonder, is it just something you're born with? And maybe a part of it, I do think it's a muscle that you build. And boy, when my father had a stroke, well, I guess it probably started, you're a kid, and if you're lucky enough to have a lovely childhood that doesn't have any types of traumas, when you hit that first trauma, whatever that is. And for me, I was 12 and my parents were separated, and it came out of the blue. I had no idea. And you feel like you can't make it. How are you ever going to survive? And I think with each trauma that you see that you can get through, that muscle, it's like you're constantly working that muscle. I think it's also just not allowing it somehow to kind of conquer you. Of course you're gonna be sad. Oh my gosh, there are those feelings. It's not like you say, "Okay, so, my husband died, but I'm resilient. Great." No, it's not like that. You have to feel all the feelings, and I think that's important too, because if you stuff it down, which I did with food for a long time, if you stuff it down, then you're not allowing yourself to feel those feelings. And then once you do, it's kind of like that feeling of after you have the best cry, you can take a breath and move on.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's important. That resilience muscle, some people have it in spades. Some people have to really struggle to find that. Um, but those who do, who put up the fight, it's so worth it, isn't it?
Oh gosh. I mean, without it, without being resilient, you are dictating the path of your life because you're crumbling and you're not living life to its fullest.
So, we talk about in Preparedness Pro, we talk about the 10 principles of preparedness, with the first one being spiritual preparedness. How did your moral compass or your spiritual values impact your resilience and adaptability?
I don't think that I really tapped into my spirituality until the last decade. And I have to say, I know spiritual can mean a lot of different things, and this might not even be what you would define it as spiritual. I am more at peace today, and about a week and a half away from the 2-year anniversary of my husband passing. And I feel after having more of a practice, a mindfulness practice, really tapping in and giving myself space, you know, I do feel like my husband's here. I know
Mm,
it sounds strange.
mm.
I'm not, I sometimes physically feel his presence. And I just feel like as long as I continue doing, trying, being curious, that he's there to kind of lead us along. And I know that's not what you meant by spirituality, but
No, it means
it
different
just
things.
popped into my head.
Yeah, it does mean different things to different people, and that's beautiful. Yeah, I do believe that our loved ones are close to us, on the other side of the veil. Um, we often talk about building a preparedness mindset. What mental tools do you think are essential for someone who wants to overcome life's hurdles and build a stronger foundation for their future?
For me, it has really been the adoption of a meditation and a journaling practice. And let me tell you, both of those things were something in the past that I would have said, that's ridiculous. That's a waste of time. That's too woo woo. I don't have time for that nonsense. I've got things to do. And when I stopped saying, I can't meditate. Oh my gosh, the first time I tried, I thought I'd jump out of my skin. I couldn't imagine why anyone would possibly put themselves through such torture. And when I persisted and kind of experimented with different types of meditation and found something that was more comfortable for me, I now long for it. And the same thing with journaling. I think that those two things, journaling also, opening up a piece of paper that's blank and someone telling me, just write on it without direction, without a question. And there are journal prompts and whatnot. But for me, it was doing it without the prompts. I thought I was scared of the blank page.
Hmm.
I think I was always worried about being the A student. Like, what am I supposed to write? But what I found is once I started writing, I could not believe what I was writing by the end. It took me on a journey, my mind, that I had no idea that it was in there. And I think tapping into yourself and realizing how strong you are, it it again builds that muscle. It's something that you can then tap into during the difficult times. Something else that I've done is I made, it's in my phone, so a maybe I can list, reminding myself of all the things that I thought I couldn't do, I could never get through, that I have. And then I go back to that list and I look at it. And if I reflect on those moments, I can remember when it happened thinking, oh my gosh, forget it. How am I ever going to survive this? But I did. And so when the next thing comes up, I remind myself, hey, you didn't think you were going to make it through that, but look where you are now. You can do it
Mm.
again.
Yeah, it seems we have a short memory on when we've gotten through rough times, and we've never been left to the wolves, so to speak. At least not for long. That's interesting. Getting a little bit of feedback there for a second. So, okay, let's look at this. So you're talking about meditation and you're talking about journaling. I think that we have these sparks within us of leadership and of honor and of goodness, such goodness. And I think that when we take time to meditate and to journal, that it gives us time to find those gems within us. It gives us time to find them and to nurture them. You mentioned overcoming limiting beliefs and even fears, correct? You had
Oh,
fears?
yes.
Okay. So you're overcoming these limiting beliefs and fears to live your best life. For our audience, fear is often a barrier to starting or sticking with self-reliant lifestyle. I wish it wasn't,
Yeah.
but it is. What practical steps helped you kick fear to the curb?
Oh my gosh. I can't say I've kicked it to the curb, it's still there. It's still there, but I've learned that the good stuff is on the other side of fear. I think a lot of times I got myself in a situation that um I was afraid of, and I'm thinking of one situation in particular where I had been extremely involved in my synagogue. I was the treasurer, I was the vice president, and I was next to be president. And I said, I'm not being president because I was scared. I was scared. Would I be able to lead a board meeting? People were pretty opinionated in those board meetings. And I don't know if I had the nerve or the capacity to shut them down without being mean and all of those things. I was worried, what happens if some situation comes up and I have no idea what to do? But the thing I think, the most afraid of was that the president had to stand up in front of the congregation twice a year and give a speech. And I was terrified of public speaking because I spent my life trying not to be seen because of my weight, because I've had a weight problem since I was an infant. And I was constantly being judged. So who wants to be seen? Because, that leads to being judged. And at the time when this came up, I was really struggling with it. And I thought to myself, if I don't do it, I am always going to wonder, could you have done it? I know you think you couldn't do it, but maybe what if, and actually, this is one of the reasons I came up with this title. On second thought, what? Maybe I can do it. I got to try, because the discomfort of wondering, not knowing, where would that take me? So I agree to do it. But of course, I agree to do it 6 months before I have to give the darn speech. The moment that I had to give that speech, I am telling you, I was sitting in the congregation thinking, okay, I am going to leave. I'm going to tell the rabbi, I'm going to text the rabbi and tell him I was ill and I have to go. I mean, I was planning my exit. I was so nervous. And I was even reading something. It wasn't like it was off the cuff talking. So I go up there and my hands with the paper, are visibly shaking and I have no saliva. And I start talking and they laughed when they were supposed to laugh, and it was like, oh, that kind of feels good. And then I got to a point in the story or in my speech where I talked something about my dad who had passed away. And it was a poignant moment. And when I had practiced it, I never got emotional. But when I was standing there in that moment and I said whatever it was about my father, the emotion bubbled up and I had to stop. Everybody felt it. And I looked out into the audience and everyone had their eyes on me. They weren't looking at their cell phone. They weren't looking down. They were with me. And some of them also had tears in their eyes. And afterwards, everyone came up to me. You are an amazing speaker. They shared stories with me based on what I talked about. And it was an unbelievable experience. I loved it so much. And it felt so good to be able to be the one who said something that was impactful to somebody else. And if it weren't for that, I wouldn't be here today.
Yeah, here you are, an international speaker.
Yep. And it was all because I faced my fear, because the fear of not trying, of looking back and always wondering, was almost worse. And that pushed me. And, I learned a lot about myself.
Well, there was definitely good stuff on the other side of that fear. And I think it's hard for us to fathom. I call it being a little bit schizophrenic. You have to talk to yourself and say,
Oh, yeah.
now look, now look, this is what could happen. So was there ever a moment that you could share with us where you thought, nope, I'm done, but you surprised yourself by persevering?
Oh, gosh. So many moments. I mean, with the insurance agency, for sure, there was so many moments. With, when I started in the online world, I started with a business called the Caregiver Support Squad, where I was coaching other caregivers to learn how to prioritize their self-care. And what I found was, because that's the secret to surviving. And honestly, that's the secret to everything, is making sure that you put yourself first. And it's not selfish, it's necessary. So that was my message. And when I was working with individual family caregivers, I was also still in the middle of caregiving. And it was very difficult. That's why they needed someone to help them understand it's okay to take care of yourselves. But what I found was that they wanted to just share their struggles as a caregiver. And I didn't want to talk about that. And I came to a point where I realized this is like negatively impacting me. And I had spent time and money. I had done some training, gotten some certifications, paid someone to make a website. I mean, I was in financially, and I thought, this is it. I can't go on. And I was going to just be done. I tried, and it wasn't for me. And then I thought, other people, you don't see it, I'm talking about business now because this was an entrepreneurial endeavor. And you see someone who's successful and you think, gosh, look how easy it is for them. Look how many, customers, followers, whatever it is. But you don't know what led them there, right? You never know what step they're on. You're on step 2, they're on step 20. Of course, they're doing better than you are. But they probably had that moment too where they didn't want to go on. And I had to decide, was I going to shift and focus my attention on something else that wasn't so difficult for me? Or was I just going to pack it in? And I felt like a failure, and who wants to go on when you feel like that? But I did.
Where do you think that feeling like a failure comes from? Is it because we assume what other people are seeing or thinking about us?
I don't know. I think to myself, I was a very good student, and it just came naturally. I didn't really have to study. I mean, I didn't do as well in college when I wasn't studying, but it just came naturally. And and my brother wasn't as good a student. He's 4 years younger. And since it was always about my weight, oh, you look good if I had lost a few pounds, or do you really need to eat that? Um, Here was one area of my life where I felt confident,
Mm.
where I shined, right? And so I think anything after that, where I guess intellectually I fail, what I think I felt like, well, what else is there? What else do I have? Because this is my lane, you know,
Mhm.
nothing else.
Yeah, I think we all get stuck with that, especially in terms of limiting beliefs. We think this is our lane and nothing else when God's given us so many talents, so many to discover.
Exactly.
And for you, for example, you didn't think public speaking was your lane, and yet here it is. You didn't think being an author was your lane, and yet
No.
here it is. Let's talk about let's switch gears a little bit. As someone who's been a caregiver and a mom to a son with special needs, correct?
Correct.
You've probably learned a thing or two about patience and flexibility. What can you share with us how has caregiving shaped your perspective on preparedness, perhaps, especially in a family setting?
Well, early on, when I became my father's caregiver, looking back, it actually started my journey of personal growth because as I had said, I didn't want to be seen. I was a person who wouldn't go into a store and ask a question. I wouldn't want to go in and order anything. Like within my group, my home, my friends, I was very loud and boisterous. But in other situations, I was not because I wanted to hide. When my dad got ill and I became his caregiver, I had to speak up because I was the one advocating on his behalf. And so it felt very different. I didn't want to let him down. So it felt very different. So in retrospect, it helped me start to build my confidence, to build my resilience, kind of to step into my power that I didn't even know that I had. I think, what I said earlier, when I was not caring for myself, I was constantly stressed, exhausted, overwhelmed, angry, resentful, even though my father didn't mean to have a stroke. My son didn't mean to be, born with autism spectrum disorder and now mental illness, but, and my husband and all the things, but still why I resented everything, everyone. Why me? Why was I put in this situation? And anything, people said hello and I could explode because the stress was building up, bubbling up from my toes all the way up to my mouth until like not nice things came out of my mouth because I was not taking the time to, I hate to use cliches, but fill my own cup, the oxygen mask. You've got to put your mask on first before you put your kids on. And I was never doing that. And it made me, it's amazed, honestly, that I did not have a heart attack. I had physical manifestations of stress, an eye twitch that would all of a sudden come, a heart palpitation. And when those things happened, that actually would scare me enough to, kind of take a look and see what I needed to incorporate to make those physical things go away.
Well, you probably were feeling like, and even now, even with all your progress, you still probably have those days where you're feeling like you're juggling flaming torches. What advice do you have for someone trying to balance, let's say, caregiving or something similar, and personal growth and preparedness, trying to live a more self-reliant lifestyle, trying to take more responsibility for themselves? What do you have to share with someone like that?
So let me just tell you the story of how I did write my first book. My second book just came out too, so I can't believe I'm the author of two books. It blows me away. But anyhow, something I never would have dreamed of, never wanted. And long story how I got to this point, but I was about to sign up for a course where the woman helped people learn to write to get their stories out there. And it was for first-time authors. And I was scared because I was like, all the other people are going to be good writers. I'm not a good writer. Like all the limiting beliefs, all the fear, talking me out of it. But that same little voice inside was like, well, wait a second. What if you could do this and you just never tried? So I was about to take the plunge, and we find out that my husband was diagnosed with terminal blood cancer. And at the time I was seeing a therapist, and I said to the therapist, I can't believe I'm even asking you or talking about it at a time like this, but I wanted to take this course, but obviously now with the situation, it's not the time. I take it the next time. And she said, no, you take that course now because you're going to need something separate from everything else that's going on during this time. And of course I was like, well, what if I can't make the meeting because something's going on with Gary, or, I don't do the assignment and, blah, blah, all the things. And she said, who cares? And I thought, yeah, I guess who cares? And let's face it, I have a good excuse. Who can say anything? And so I started and the writing process, whatever. It was a very big struggle, just understanding, figuring out what the heck I was writing. But once I got that done, I wrote almost every day. I scheduled it in. If my husband, was in the hospital, I brought all my stuff with me to the hospital. And when he was sleeping or he went down for a test, I wrote. I would wake up at 5:30 in the morning, and right before he woke up, I would write in the middle of the afternoon when he didn't need me. I would tell him if he was okay. I'm going upstairs for an hour. Don't bother me unless it's an emergency. And when he died 6 months later, I was three chapters shy of finishing the book. But the point of my story is there's no excuse. You don't have to write a book. But no matter how your life is spinning out of control, and I couldn't control his cancer, and I couldn't control the other things that were going on with him, but I could control what I was doing. And it's always so easy to say, oh, there's no time. If you want to find the time, you can, regardless. If you do have to wake up 15 minutes earlier to, sit and drink your coffee by yourself, do it. So stop making the excuses, because I don't think that there's any circumstance where it would prohibit you from doing something positive, something to move you in the direction that you want to go.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Yeah, you're running an insurance agency, an online store. What do you sell on your online store, by the way?
That came up out of the blue, and I just went with it. I have always loved hearts. You can see one behind me there. I've always loved hearts. And when I was in school in Washington, D.C., in the 80s, there was a store that sold only items with hearts on it. And I wanted that store.
Hmm.
And of course, it never happened. And one day I woke up and thought, hey, I hadn't thought about this in a long time. It's 2022. I can have a heart store online. I don't need to worry about, brick and mortar. And so it is all different heart designs. So
Wonderful.
shirts, sweatshirts, totes, phone cases, stuff
So
like that.
with an insurance agency, an online store, a podcast, and I suspect that that's not the end of your resume right now. You're basically a one woman preparedness empire.
I
um,
guess so.
what's your secret sauce for staying productive and passionate about your causes?
There are dips, believe me. I am actually in a little bit. I had been in a little bit of a dip. And what gets me out of it many times are the people I'm surrounded by, who encourage me, who remind me how far I've come when I feel like something's not working or I'm spinning my wheels. They remind me. And I've actually met so many amazing people just like you online that, nowadays there's no excuse. There's nothing that divides us with all this technology. And I really have to say that I think that the people that have surrounded myself with are there to help me.
Community is a big part of preparedness. And so having a community of people to surround you and for you to surround is so important, that give and that take. How would you suggest to foster meaningful connections when life feels overwhelming?
For me, I've always actually found support groups super helpful. I mean,
Mm.
sometimes you get groups that you don't jive with, right? You don't know. There's just a different vibe. But I say that because at least that's a place where you have something in common. People can understand where you're coming from. You don't have to be embarrassed to say things about certain struggles or thoughts that you have, because they get it. And when you realize that it's not just you going through this, I mean, I would say more recently, I was at a very difficult time. Both my older son, and my husband suffered from depression and anxiety. And it is very difficult now with my son, but he's in a good place right now. And if I had told other people who have never experienced the effects of mental illness on a person what was happening, they wouldn't understand. They'd be mortified, and they would tell me to do things that just don't work with when you're dealing with mental illness. And so I wound up going to an online group through NAMI, National Alliance for Mental Illness, and the group was for family members of people who suffer from mental illness. And to be able, because it's very, 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 I keep using the word very, I don't know how to even really emphasize just how hard it is on everyone. And so to find a safe place to feel seen and actually, and then they provided resources and gave me ideas that I hadn't thought of. So I think, it doesn't even have to be like a support group for an issue. It could be a book club. It could be a gardening club. It could be, wherever you can go to find your common interest with other people, I think is very helpful.
Well, you clearly have a good sense of humor about life's ups and downs. What's one of the funniest things that happened when you were chasing your dreams? Did you ever have a moment that made you think, well, I didn't see that coming?
Oh my gosh, that's a hard question. I don't know the answer to that. I'm sure I do have a good sense of humor because I learned early on, and my parents really instilled this in me. Anytime anyone would make, a joke, I would be hurt. And it was almost like they made me practice my not self-deprecation, but being able to laugh at yourself. We all do stupid things. I can tell you, I have actually, it has nothing to do with moving on, but learning to laugh at yourself. I can't believe I'm going to tell you this publicly. Okay. But this is what defines me, and it's okay with me. It's okay with me now. It was okay with me then. And I think that because of that, it helps me to laugh it off when I do something dumb. Because as I said, I was very good at school, but I lack a lot of common sense. I mean, a lot. And I don't cook. I've never cooked. I don't like it. I don't like food shopping. And when I met my husband, I knew it was a perfect match because he loved all of those things. And I literally never went to the supermarket. But this is when we were first, I don't know if we were I don't know if we were married or engaged. We were living together though. And one Friday I had off and he didn't. And I thought, okay, this is why I know it's early in the relationship because otherwise I never would have even attempted this. And I said, I'm going to surprise him and I'm going to make him something. And I called my mother. What do I do? And she said, go get the chicken and da da da. And she tells me the steps. So I go to the supermarket and I'm walking up and down the aisle, up and down the aisle. You don't just buy chicken, but I don't know. I know literally nothing. Do I get these? This says chicken wings. This says thighs. This is breast. Like I was in there for like 40 minutes. And then I look at a package and I'm like, what? What the heck is this? And I left and I ordered Chinese food. And so we're eating the Chinese food and I'm telling him, I was doing this. And I said, I had no idea that people eat rooster. And he goes, what are you talking about? I said, Garrett, I was in the store. They were selling rooster. And I was adamant. I'm like, I'll bet you $1 million after we're done, we're going to go down to the supermarket, blah, 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 blah. And as it's happening, all of a sudden I realized, oh no, I bet you it was a roaster.
Oh dear, that's funny.
That defines me.
Well, your podcast is called Maybe I Can. If someone's listening today and thinking, maybe I can, what's the first step they should take to flip that script?
Oh, it is all in your head. It is all in your head. I think Henry Ford said something like, if you think you can, you're right. And if you think you can't, you're right. And that's why my first book, my memoir, is called On Second Thought, Maybe I Can, because I was always that person who said, I can't do that. Anything. It could be the smallest thing. That's ridiculous. And I would say, I can't do that. And that's fear talking. And we all have that fear. But think about the things that you thought you couldn't do and you did do. What's the worst thing that could happen? You fail? You learn something about yourself when you fail. I learned that I couldn't have a business for caregivers. It was too much for me. Okay, that's information now moving forward that I can use.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that, Debbie. If people want to find you and your book and your podcast, share with us where they go.
Definitely my website. It is debbier.weiss.com. You have to put in the R, otherwise you'll wind up on a realtor in California.
Okay, and spell Weiss for everyone.
Weiss like Sam, 2 S's like Sam.
Okay, wonderful. And you said you've got a book that just came out too?
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's called The Sprinkle Effect, A Guide to Living a More Colorful and Fulfilling Life. My first book is my memoir. It's just stories that tell an overall story of the trajectory of my life and struggles. And it gives no advice. And so after the first book came out, people said, that's great. Now, what'd you do? What'd you do to change? What have you done since you turned 50? And so the sprinkle effect is 15 different sprinkles of things that I've sprinkled into my life, small things, slowly, that have made a difference. And so the sprinkles are things like mindset, belief, resilience, action, dreams, vision, curiosity, joy. And
Wonderful.
so, yeah, it has practical tools to help you yourself work through those sprinkles.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for your time, Debbie. We appreciate you, and we appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing your path with us and sharing your power with us as well. Wish you all the best, and hope that you have a very happy new year.
Oh, thank you so much. The same to you.